do we got? Dr. Vaughn! Who here has read?
This is my con.
I see some other people. Who here has read some existentialism? Sartre, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Heidegger. That's great. That's really awesome. So, some of you may know, some of you heard. I gave a talk to the Year Transformational folks about existentialism not too long ago, which was great. It was a great experience for me, and I got a lot of great feedback from it. But it got me thinking. We talk a lot here, and Judith talks a lot about existentialism in the context of choice, right? In the context of purpose. So we talk about existential anxiety, and we talk about ontological guilt, and we talk about original project, and we talk about it's more about kind of purpose and meaning, and there's a lot of that to it. But I started to think to myself, what is emotion, right? What does emotion, existentialism have to say about emotion? And I really didn't know. So I went back and I started doing some research on it, and I really got turned on by it the more I thought about it. So I called up Bob and I said, hey, do you think I could give a talk, to the folks in the year about, existential emotion? They're like, no, we think you can give a talk to the graduate students. So that's what I want to talk about. Talk about why existentialism is important in thinking about emotion, and in particular, how emotion is important to existentialism. And I'm going to call this talk, Joy is not something that we have, it's something that we do. Which plays on a country song, and a Clint Black song. Does anybody know that song? Come on, where have you people been?
Studying.
Good answer.
I'm not going to sing it for you, but it's called Love's Not Something That We Have, It's Something That We Do. Sappy country song. He's singing to his wife about how he remembers their wedding and everything was wonderful about their life and their marriage. And the chorus is, love's not something that we have, it's something that we do, right? It's not something that you want. So one, I just love it because it's sappy and it kind of makes me cry all the time. And two, it catches another thing. But three, it also really captures, I think, the spirit of the role emotions play in Heidegger and Sartre. And I think I get points for using Clint Black and Heidegger. If guys at the Philosophy Guild would be so impressed. Okay, so what is that all about? So in the history of philosophy, emotions rank somewhere between an afterthought and a real pain in the ass. Because philosophically speaking, truth is about concepts, right? Truth is about what you think, it's about your ideas, and emotions have nothing whatsoever to do with that, right? So the philosophical ideal is to elevate yourself to this plane of pure thought, right? Pure reason, pure ideas, where you have the clear picture in your mind of how reality really works, and emotions pop up along the way. So we either deal with that and we work them into our theory, right? And we theorize them out of existence. It's sort of not important, but they're accidents. They're absolutely accidents of human experience. Existentialism is important because they turn that on their head. And it was really the first time in the history of philosophy that emotions not only became important for consciousness, they became a critical precondition for the existence of consciousness at all. Right? So, it's an ontological precondition for the possibility of consciousness. Right? Got that? What does that really mean? So I like to talk about existentialism, I like to talk about movie theaters, right? One, because I like movies, and two, because it makes a lot of sense. So think of this as a giant movie, there's a screen, right? So think of this as a giant movie theater, and there's your screen, and we're here, and this is reality. And reality goes on the screen. So something is projecting, there's images on the screen and stuff going on, and I'm observing it, I'm here in the theater, and I'm watching what's happening on the screen. And I'm sort of passively taking that stuff in. I'm having thoughts about it and ideas, and maybe I'm having feelings and I'm having reactions. But there's a movie out there, and I'm in here, and I'm watching. So truth is a matter of, am I getting the movie right? Am I seeing the movie the way it's supposed to be seen? Am I taking away what's supposed to be seen about? It's a very binary type of experience. And philosophers talk a lot about how that works, and is the movie real or am I real? Existentialism turns that on its head. Right? There's a screen, that's it. I'm the movie. You're the movie. So everything that we see on the screen is a product of our own consciousness. We're not passive. This is an active experience that we have as consciousness, constituting the objects of consciousness. So everything that's on the screen is an interaction between us and being, which is just the undifferentiated whateverness of whatever's out there on the screen. It's a complete and total inversion of how the experience actually works. And what you have to remember as we go through this, as you read existentialism or think about it, that the first law of existentialism is there's nothing back there. There's no projector. We're the projector. So it's not a matter of, can we get outside of the theater and look in and see it right? That's not the object of the exercise. The object of the exercise is, can I accurately explain and understand the experience of projecting a movie for myself? So it elevates experience, human experience, above all this conceptual stuff, right, that we talked about a while ago. So it's not about knowledge, it's about mapping back to experience. For Heidegger, it's a special type of being that does that. Right, so kind of with me on the movie thing? Yeah. So the being that's in the theater projecting the movie is a very special kind of being, right? He calls it Dasein. Heidegger makes up lots of words. Dasein, that literally means being there. So it's being that's present to itself, right? Being that's aware. And what's different about that type of being, lots of things are different about it, but what makes emotions important for Heidegger is that we're thrown into the situation, and that's the word he uses. Human experience is thrown. I'm in the situation. I'm in this damn theater, right? I didn't ask to be here. That's just a fact. And I'm disposed towards the stuff on the screen in such a way that it matters. So the core feature of being for Heidegger is, as he calls it, care. What's on the screen, what I'm experiencing, matters to me. I'm not passive. It's just not sort of floating by with me. I'm engaged with it in some way. I'm making opinions about it, right? And I'm having reactions to it. I'm projecting myself into it. I'm seeing possibilities for myself what's in there. That's a phenomenon he calls care, which is really at the heart of being for him. So you don't get to be conscious unless you care, right? That's just the nature of what consciousness is. It's being that actually cares about being in general. Okay? So mood, as he calls it, is the mode in which we care about what's going on out there. Mood, as in M-O-O-D, right? So we care about being, which is how the world as we see it comes into being for us, right? How we create it through this mechanism of mood. The world discloses this word, right? It discloses itself to us, kind of depending upon the mood that we're in. And Heidegger calls it attunement, is how that happens. I love that phrase, right? Attunement. Think about that for a minute. So if you're listening to a piece of music, say it's a symphony and there's a lot of stuff going on in it, you will hear different things depending on how you attune yourself, right? If it's background music at the doctor's office, I may not register it at all. If I'm really focused on the string section, I may pick up the second violin, right, as opposed to something else. If I'm really only interested in the rhythm, I may pick up the drums and anything else. You get the idea? It's the same experience in a way, but my experience really depends on how I tune myself to what's going on in the experience. So mood works a lot like that. So how does it work in terms of an actual experience? So back to the movies. Who here has seen Apocalypse Now? Love that movie, right? You remember the first scene in the movie? Yeah, I'll tell you. So the first scene in the movie, there's just a jungle scene, and there's sort of helicopters flying around, sort of stuff. And the doors, the doors come in, right? At the end, right? This is right? Boom! The jungle explodes in fire and napalm, and then it goes on. The character moves on. It's really moving, right? Really kind of haunting scene. It sets the scene for the whole movie. When the music comes on, you know exactly what that scene is about, right? You know exactly what's going on. Got the idea? Mm-hmm. Same scene. Think about that: jungle, helicopters, napalm, and the theme song from the Mickey Mouse Club. Emily, different movie, man. That is a totally different movie. It's a totally different experience. So in our experience, mood, emotion, works a lot like the soundtrack for Heidegger. It works a lot like the soundtrack. It determines how we take on the experience. It determines how it discloses itself to us. So here's what's different and really important about that. Conceptually that works, but it's an imperfect analogy, right? Because you could theoretically have a movie without a soundtrack. It would suck, but you could have a movie without a soundtrack. For Heidegger, no mood, no movie. Mood is the lens. Right? You think about the projector. Mood is the lens. You twist it this way, you twist it that way, this comes into focus, that comes into focus, but no lens, no movie. So that's when they say it's a precondition for consciousness. For us to be conscious at all, to have any type of experience, presupposes some kind of mood that we're in. And you can argue, well, frankly, Chris, I just have no mood at all. I'm just having one of those days where I'm just sort of here. That's a mood. Right? That's a mood. And you can change it and alter it depending on your experience. So we're always in a mood, and no mood, no movie. Really flips around the role of emotion, right? It's not an accident anymore. It's not something that happens. It's not a reaction that happens after the fact. It's precognitive, Heidegger and Sartre will say, prior to cognition. So before I even have an idea of what's going on, before I really even form a perception of what's going on in the movie, there's a mood that exists that's helping me determine what all that's going to be. Sorry. So now here's where it gets really fun. That sounds great, philosophically speaking, but is it actually work? So there's a guy, Michael Radcliffe, who does the neuroscience of existentialism. Way! Which is really awesome. He does philosophy of psychiatry. I did not know there was such a thing. I think that's pretty cool. And looks at how neuroscience does or doesn't pay off these theories. And lo and behold, a lot of the neuroscience really does. So there are certain kinds of neurological disorders that people have, which on the face of them are very strange, but they pay off this Heideggerian way of looking at the world. So when we talk about the examples that we use a lot of folks who are emotionally impaired in some way and unable to make decisions, right? The red pen, blue pen, red pen, blue pen. It's one way. There are other disorders that are very, very rare but very telling, one of which, for example, is sort of where folks recognize the faces of their loved ones, but believe they've been replaced by imposters. Right? So they recognize that these are my parents, but they're not really my parents. Because there's an emotion. Well, I think he is. I think he is. Her, I don't know about. Because they're emotionally impaired in such a way that while they recognize that they don't have the emotional connection, the emotional reaction, the feelings of love or care or response or whatever that they typically would have, so they don't buy it. Mm-hmm. There's another case where folks are, the Radcliffe uses, folks are paralyzed on the left side of their body, but they don't believe it. They can't move the left side of their body, but they're convinced they can. Right? Absolutely convinced, and they'll go to great lengths to make up reasons why they can't do stuff with their left hand. Again, they have an emotional impairment, specifically, that does not allow them to process the feeling of doubt and all the other feelings that are accompanied by not being able to use your left hand. So through a Heideggerian lens, they don't have the mood apparatus, right, that's allowing them to tie the story together. That's what mood does in existentialism. It allows us to keep the thread of the narrative, the thread of the story. And in the examples that we gave, these are folks who cannot pick up on the fact that the story has broken down because they lack the emotional reaction that tells them to do that. So they continue operating on the narrative that they had all along. Makes sense? So that's the function of mood. It's the storyteller. Mood is what lets us tell the story. And as the mood changes and the feeling changes, the story changes along with it. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. Sartre is going to take that one level further, right? And say, okay, not only is it a precondition of consciousness, it's a weapon. Right? Moods are actually weapons that we use to transform the world when our story breaks down. Sartre uses emotion in probably every single book that he ever wrote. He wrote a really, really great little book that actually I recommend you called Sketch for a Theory of Emotion. It's probably the most readable thing he ever did, which is saying a lot about Sartre. But in that, he puts out an entire theory that, at the core of it, emotions they're not states, they're not things that happen to us, right? They're not things that are in us. Right? Ever think about when we talk about mood, how we use it? We're in a mood. Mm-hmm. There's never a mood in us. I got a bad mood in me today. Remember out there, right? Well, there's a really bad mood out there. I'd be careful if I were you. We're in a mood, right? We're sort of in moods. For Sartre, emotions are actions, right? And they're actions of a very specific kind. And they're actions that we resort to when our narrative breaks down. So back to the movies, right? Emotions are what clue us in, among other things, to twists in the plot. So we're going along, they're happily in love, right? She gets hit by a car, right? Emotional. Plot twist, right? Emotions are what help us navigate that. For Sartre, emotion works very much the same way in our own experience, in our own life. They don't just help us navigate plot twists, they create them. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So for Sartre, we go through life, we have a narrative. When our narrative breaks down in such a way that we can't respond to it with the means that are normally at our disposal, we resort to emotion as a way to change the story up. How does that work? So I go for a walk in the woods here in Wisconsin. That's my narrative for the day. Lovely day. I'm on vacation. Right? And I'm strolling in the woods, walk. Bear. Not part of my story, right? That was not part of my narrative today. If I react in what they would call the natural attitude, right, which is the experience, the way we normally think about the world's out there and I'm in here, it's where the laws of cause and effect all apply, right? All the rules of logic and reality apply. My means are pretty limited, right? I can wrestle the bear if I want to. I probably will not win, right? I play it out, and given my limited capabilities, I'm probably bear chow right about now. Fear lets me change the movie. Lets me change the movie. How does that let me change the bear? I faint. Movie's over! Movie's over! No bear! From the outside, that's a very poor adaptation. Right? Very poor adaptation, right? Because now I'm sort of silent bear chow. Internally, it is an excellent response. Excellent! The bear's gone! It's a funny example, but you get the idea. How does it work? So if this is call it the deterministic attitude, right? Where we've got laws of cause and effect, bear, me, food. Emotions are magic. Emotions are magic. They allow us to magically transform the world in a way that suits our story, that suits our narrative. Lovely quote from Sartre, man is always a wizard to man. So we have this emotional level where we're magically transforming the world. And it's not just fear. So think about anger, right? Let's take anger for a minute. Yeah, Pierre walks in the room, right? God, I hate that guy. Right? Gets on my last nerve. Ooh, I hate that guy, right? My anger sort of boils up in the room. How does that change my narrative? Pierre is now no longer someone I have to deal with, or that I can deal with in a different way, right? Now he's somebody that I can deal with aggressively. Now he's somebody that I can ignore. If he keeps it up, I may just slap him, right? I've transformed the world in such a way that my reaction to Pierre is valid in a way that it would not have been before. Sadness, you can think of it the same way. My girlfriend, my true love, dumps me. I'm despondent. I'm beside myself. I'm lying in bed under the covers, listening to Air Supply.
That's for all the old folks.
Eating Fruit Loops, right? Nothing seemed very interesting to me, right? This is just where I need to be. I don't want to face the world without the means at my disposal, right? Without the relationship, without her, without everything that meant to me. All that's gone. I don't want to deal with the world in those circumstances. And in my sadness, I change the world into a place where I don't have to. It's not interesting. Food doesn't taste good, just Fruit Loops. Just the Fruit Loops. There's no reason to go outside. So even though it's my emotion, the world has changed. I've magically transformed the world in a place that suits my story. An awful lot better. Great. Cute, Chris, that's great. Joy. Can you do that one? I can. Here's how it works for Sartre. He calls out joy very specifically, and it's fascinating how he does it. So here I am, right? I'm in bed, I got my Air Supply, I got my Fruit Loops, and she calls. She calls. Awesome, right? And my heart leaps, and I'm just so happy, and I'm just so excited. What's going on? How did I change the world? What I'm doing is I'm imagining the whole infinite series of wonderful experiences that I'm going to have with her. We're going to sit with her. We're going to hold hands and watch movies, and everything we're going to do all that. It's going to be awesome. I'm making all of that happen for me right now. Everything would take a long time. It's going to happen in really small chunks and increments, right? You're moving out over these times. I don't have time for that. I want it now, right? I want the entire relationship to unfold for me right now. And in my joy, that is exactly what I make happen. That's exactly what I make happen for myself. Magical sort of transformation of the world. So what do all these examples have in common? When the path forward is blocked, right, by normal means, I can resort to this magical transformation of the world. Does that mean that any of this is untrue? Right? Is magic bad? It's bad. It's unreal. I need to live in the real world. It's absolutely real, and you absolutely believe it. You're not making this up. We're not imagining this stuff. We're not putting it on or pretending. It's as real as it gets, and you absolutely believe it. And the world does change for you, right? And you can't just stop. According to Sartre, you can't. I noticed. Oh my gosh, I'm creating a world where there's air supply and Fruit Loops. I should really stop and change that. You can't just pull the lever because you're not choosing your feeling. You're choosing a world, right? I'm choosing a world in which I don't have to engage, and I don't have to involve, and I don't have to. And I could make a different decision, but it's not as easy as getting my ass out of bed, right? It's choosing an entirely different world, which means choosing an entirely different project for myself. So, I don't know how far you guys have gotten with all that, but that's the idea is emotions serve me. They serve my original project, or who I think I want to be, and the possibilities that I've projected onto the world in the future. So they are significant in the sense that they tell me something about the project. They tell me something about me. So I can't just make them up willy-nilly. I gotta take them pretty seriously. And what I can do if I take them seriously is start to uncover, and if you will, back my way into what is my original project, right? Analysis. It's the existential version of psychoanalysis. Is I can deconstruct, if you will, from my emotions and my feelings, what my real original project is. There's no unconscious in existentialism. Nothing is unconscious. Everything in consciousness is conscious. That's totally true. I have no idea what I'm doing this sort of stuff. I have no idea what I'm creating emotions. Right, you don't. You're conscious of it, you're not reflective. You could. That's the real difference between Sartre in particular and Freud, is for Freud, I've got this unconscious that I will never ever be able to access, right? It's just part of me, I'll never be able to understand and bring to the surface. For Sartre, it's there and I am conscious and aware of it, much in the aware that you're paying attention to me and not thinking about the fact that you're paying attention to me, but you know. And it's possible for you to flip and start thinking, instead of paying attention to me, start paying attention to your attitude towards me right now. Please don't, I like you paying attention to me. But that's the idea, and that's the role that emotions play, is why they're important. So not accidents at all. And they give us information of a very, very deep type. It's not just psychology. It's not just about the inner workings of the mind. It's really about who I am. It's something about who I am and who I choose to be and how I choose the world. So, back to the movies, right? I love movies. So back to the movie theater. It's the lens that kind of tells us what movie it is. Emotions, in an existential sense, are what clues us in to plot twists, right? This isn't the story that I thought it was. Something's different. And for Sartre, who takes it further, perhaps than anyone else, there are actually ways for us to engineer twists in the plot, for us to suit ourselves. Not in a cynical sort of way, right? Not in a manipulative sort of way. It's just part of human nature. It's part of who we are. We can't help it, right? We can't help to be that way. Now, Sartre being Sartre, it's all in bad faith, right? It doesn't really work at the end of the day. But again, that's part of being human too. You can step back, much like we've done here, and sort of think about it at this level, but that's not the way that we live it. Kierkegaard says, we understand life backwards, but we live life forwards. So our everyday experience of emotion is very much our experience in the way that we live it, but the existentialists are saying, there's another side to it. There's another side to it. If you flip around your ordinary experience, what you get to is much more true, much more deeper, and much more closely tied to being. So in other words, the country songs got it right. Love's not something that we have, it's something that we do. Joy is not something that we have, it's something that we do. I don't think that's what Clint Black had in mind, but perhaps he will forgive me. And I don't know if we have time for questions. But.
I'd love to do a paired sharing and questions, but wasn't it fantastic? Do a paired share. I'd like you to, first of all, say what you got out of it, what the implications were, and what questions you'd like to have. And And then we'll open the floor up with Dr. Vaughn. So pair up.
Hold on. One.
1.5, 1.5.
I've got it. Who's got it? Great. Can I just hit record?
So it's always nice to know when you have an impact. How many would say you had a significant impact? Yeah. I just want to acknowledge, can we get Jordan a phone? Sure. I just want to acknowledge how challenging what you put together is. I've read that stuff. And actually to make those translations and make it that clear, to me, is a very impressive process. I just want to acknowledge you for doing that.
Thank you.
I would defy anybody to read a journal in philosophy that could say it as clearly, because philosophers don't tend to even explore it.
No.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
A couple of reactions I just wanted to, one of them, just sharing with Judith in my sharing was, I'd never gotten that Sartre was so close to what Siegel says about, I think from the neuroscience perspective, about the nature of emotion. He talks about a primary level of emotion that's really about orienting to the world and predisposing us to act. And so the sense in which emotion is not separate from cognition, but emotion is actually a way of experiencing the world, and that's really what's going on. I thought it expressed that incredibly well, and I think that was incredibly powerful. So just want to also acknowledge that seeing that connection of the existential work with neuroscience, to me, is very important and moving. So I appreciate you making that connection.
Cool. Thanks.
And the one question I have is, you talked about how do we shift our emotional world from Sartre's point of view, and you talked about the Life Project and how that can be a way to reorient when we might decide that the movie we're projecting or the we're projecting is not the one we want to be doing. Could you say a little bit more about
And
that?
you used the term bad faith when you said it.
Yeah.
I did.
Could you articulate a little more about that process? Because I didn't fully get that. I wanted to understand.
Yeah, I did do that. So the idea of an original project in Sartre, it's the organizing factor for all the decisions that we make. So it's not like you sort of sit at home and you go, my project is, I'm going to be, Bob Wright. I always pick on Bob. I'm going to be Bob Wright when I grow up, right? Our project is the sum total of all the decisions that we've made up until now and the decisions that we're making, but it has a unifying theme behind it, right? It sort of adds up to something. So choosing my original project is simply making a different choice right now in the moment, right? To rethink the project. To appreciate what that project is and really kind of undermine it, understand what your project has really been is very difficult for Sartre, right? It involves a very difficult process of analysis. It's very, very rare that it's something that people would actually do to get down to it. In the sense of changing your emotional state, it really is a matter of making a decision that's off project, if you will. So off project. And for Sartre, all projects are the same, right? They all have the same amount of value. Another famous quote from Sartre is, "It matters the same if you get drunk alone or are a leader of nations." Morally and ethically, they're all the same. But I make, as a drunk, as a solitary drunk, I make different decisions than a leader of nations would. And I can change my project, in other words, I can change my emotional state by making a decision in the moment that's off project, right? That takes me in a different direction. And hence the project changes. And when I do that, the world will then appear to me differently. So from the perspective of the solitary drunk, this room of people would be something to be perhaps avoided at all costs, right? More is lost. For a leader of nations, this would be a room of people to be conquered. Right? So in making the decision of what my project is, my emotional state changes, but also the way the world around me kind of appears to be changes in the moment. Does that make sense?
And the bad faith comes in how?
So the bad faith comes in when we believe that those decisions are real, right, and that they're going to stick. So when I choose this, sort of this room of people as a room of people to be avoided and think that that's a feature of the world. It's just the way the world is, right? That's just it. And I just figured it out, It's bad faith. And because at some level we know that that's not true. I could choose differently. I could do it right now, right? I could do it this very moment, just like pack up and leave. And in my heart, I know that. So when I project my decision onto the world as a feature of reality over which I have no control and for which I'm not responsible, I'm in bad faith, which for Sartre is what we do almost all the time. So, pure reflections very rare.
I have a
Yes.
question, a comment first.
Phones, yeah.
I love the analogy of the projector and the whole film analogy actually, and what you just described made me think of storyboarding. Like we have this dynamic storyboard and we can change a scene on the fly and choose to be isolated or choose to be, in community in that moment.
Right.
And that was really a powerful image that you painted with the apocalypse now. The question that I had was wrapped around, you made the statement of whether mood was analogous to state. And I'd like you to share a little bit more about that, because I was kind of confused about whether you said it was or it wasn't.
Mood is not a state.
Okay.
Right? For these guys, mood is not a state. It's not something that happens to me.
Okay.
I just woke up and I don't know what's wrong.
So mood is more, could you elaborate a little bit more?
It's a
on
way
that?
of, because of these crazy German words for it, right? But the German word for it is finding oneself in, right? It's a way of finding yourself in a situation, right? Having found oneself. It's a mode of being, more than feeling. Psychologically, we experience a bit of feeling, but it's an orientation. How's that? It's an orientation towards the world that discloses things to me in very different ways. So it's far more than a feeling. That's just the psychology of it. That's the of a mood. But mood is actually an orientation of reality that makes reality possible at all for Heidegger. I couldn't even be conscious of the world if I didn't have a mood underlying that sort of made it possible. I think it's the lens of the film. Is that?
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, right. Just a question, Chris. Have you seen the movie Being There?
Yeah.
It's this. When you talked about Heidegger and how do you pronounce it? Dazan, and being there and then thrown into a situation, and then your experience kind of creates. If I got you right, your experience becomes. Can you share again, please, what Dazan is? Am I saying that right?
Dazan.
Dazan. Because when you said that, I just thought of Chauncey Gardner, and I was
that's exactly what Chauncey Gardner's meant to be.
Okay, thank you.
That's
what I wanted to
exactly what that
know.
book is about. That's exactly what that book is about. It's the human experience is being thrown into situation, right? He says thrownness.
Yes.
Thrownness, right? Out of which we project ourselves into the future. So I'm here, but I'm always projecting myself towards future possibilities. Right? Cool. Another way that he puts it.
Yeah.
And then I'm tied up in my history, right? Heidegger's fallenness, right? So I'm sort of in my present, fallenness. I'm in these things, right, that are around me that I have to deal with. So thrownness is where you start from. So the possibilities are limitless. You can make any decision that you want, right? You can choose your own values, you can choose all that, but you have to start here. You can't undo the rest of it. So you will always have the experiences that you've had. You will always have the choices that you've made. You will always have the situation as you've interpreted it. And for Heidegger, some of that's social too, right? We are with other people. That's part of it. That's part of the facticity. That's part of, we're just thrown into the world with all the rest of y'all. So the thrownness is the starting point, and projection is what happens next. So back to mood, just to tie it off. So mood is what I make of what I've been tossed into. So just as freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know who's next. Karen, I think.
Well, just trying to elaborate. When you say mood, to me that seems more like what we call matrix. It's like your basic orientation to my more like Adler. It's my lifestyle, my fictional final, my orientation, how I make reality make sense.
I'll buy that. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I'll buy that.
And then so I was understanding mood as sort of emotion, but I would, in my own mind, and you don't have to agree, it's like I would see emotion as something that would wash through that, but not necessarily be, like I could still have a basic orientation to the world, a basic mood about the world, and then I might be more joyful in that mood or more sad in that mood. I don't know, so I'm just kind of noodling on that.
No, I like that. I kind of like that way of playing with that. I think where Heidegger would disagree that was possible without emotional content. In other words, that I could have a basic orientation that was not at its core emotional in nature, right, or mood-like in nature. I think that's where he would disagree. So if you think of matrix as that sort of basic predisposition to the world, for Heidegger it is a wash, right, with emotion and feeling. It's riven through and through, and there's no way to pull it out. It's like cream in the coffee, right? There's no way for us to pull the emotional content out of it. But I really like the way you think about it. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Thank you.
Oh,
So when you talk about thrownness, are we involved in what we're thrown into?
No.
Or are you saying that's just a situation that
Welcome
happens?
to the world, baby.
So if I'm thrown into this room with
Yeah.
this group of people,
We're thrown out.
right? Did I have anything to do with that, or?
No, it's absolutely gratuitous. It's totally gratuitous. There's no reason for it whatsoever. There's no reason for it. There's no explanation. It's just the way it is. That's human experience. That's our experience. We wake up and we're here. We're here in this situation and not some other. And I'm me and not somebody else. And it happened just because it did. I mean, that's where human experience begins.
Sounds like you're saying it's irrelevant how you got there.
Yeah, it is irrelevant how you got there. So what's happened in the past is relevant, but how and why is a meaningless question. You know? By definition, it has no reason.
Very cool.
Thanks.
Rich?
Going up front,
Could you talk about to the existentialist, there is no such, did you say there's no such thing as the unconscious?
Yes, there is no unconscious. So for Sartre, an unconscious consciousness, right, is like a dry wet. Right? It's meaningless, it's pointless, it's silly, it's absurd. There's no such thing as an unconscious consciousness, there's two different things. So everything in consciousness is conscious and is capable of being reflected on. So again, for Freud, there's this kind of nasty, messy id thing deep down inside, and no matter how hard I dig, I'll never get to it, but I can get clues and sort of read on it. None of that's true. For Sartre, that's all an excuse. That's all bad faith. It's you. You did it, and you were totally conscious of it at the time. And maybe you haven't reflected on it. That's just because you choose not to. Absolutely, absolutely not. There's no unconsciousness whatsoever, and there's no ego either. So, there's no.
how's it bad faith?
What?
How's it bad faith?
So it's bad faith because it's defining yourself as a thing, right? For Sartre, there's consciousness and things, and they're two completely different. There's being in itself, right, and then being for itself, and the two can never meet. And every time we pretend that we have, we're lying, right? Because it doesn't work and you know it. So you are not a thing. You're a consciousness, right, that's making choices, and you're inventing yourself every single moment by making those choices. And when you say, I'm done, I am who I am whoever I'm going to be, you're making yourself a thing, and that's bad faith. It's a lie. And because you know it's not true. You know you could change your mind. That's what freedom means, right, for Sartre, is I could choose differently. I'm this guy, however I define myself, I could be somebody else. And that's what existential anxiety is all about. It's the consciousness that, shit, it's really up to me. So that's why the unconscious is not a good one. It's philosophically impossible, right? It's just there's no being that could be both of those things at the same time. But also for him, it's like kind of a lame excuse.
I guess I'm kind of stuck on this bad faith thing a little bit too, but
Me too.
so I guess the way that I'm hearing this is that we make our decisions in bad faith because we put this projection onto the world as far as this is the decision that I'm making right now for this particular projection in the world, and this is that choice is also going to inform I guess my life project and how I am changing it in the moment. But it's not in bad faith because I don't really know what's going to happen out in the future. I really don't know what that projection is going to really hold true. So, what does it all mean anyway?
No, that's not right. It's bad faith because you think it's real. You think it's not your projection. You think that's the way it really is. So I've got this vision of myself out in the world, and I think that's just how it is. It's a feature of the world, right? I'm just a thing. I'm just this thing that's described by all of my bad habits and all of my, beachwear or whatever, right? And I own that as a thing in the world. That's the bad faith about it. What would be less in bad faith is understanding that it's a projection. Like, yes, I have to be in the world and I have to choose a way to be, but I'm projecting that all the time, and I'm responsible for it, and I'm responsible for the world that creates around me. That's a more authentic way to be. It stops being authentic when you believe that the world has given it to you, or you've discovered it in the world. I did all this work and I discovered myself. Now I know who I am. No, right? That's the definition of bad faith.
It's almost like a moment-to-moment existence. that kind of.
That's authenticity, right? Authenticity is choosing to choose every single moment and being responsible for what happens next.
So Chris Gordon and I are here. It sounds like what they're saying is that bad faith is the human condition.
Yep.
And the only thing we can do is accept that and hit this laser pinpoint of what is, what isn't, that's that, and stop fucking around with what you're thinking.
Something like that.
Exactly.
Kind of what he said.
That's a freaking laser point. It's not. It's just an indictment. It's not. It's not. I see why someone would write no exit.
Yeah, right. His other famous book is Nausea.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And now I know why he went to Changing Society, because he created himself.
Let's just move on. Let's move on to John.
I think I'm still maybe beating up on this point, but it's reminding me of something we talked about in summer training, I think 2 years ago. Judith, I think it was Ed Tronic too, but what I remember from it is, like, if I'm in a good mood, it's not because good things happen to me, it's because I've chosen to be in a good mood, and my consciousness is then going to look for the things to confirm why I'm in a good mood. And the same with the bad.
Which is where the bad faith comes in.
So the bad faith, right? So the bad faith is thinking that it's because it was something outside myself rather than I've created my reality.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's kind of the big takeaway of it. It's Pierre isn't. I'm not angry because Pierre is hateful. He's hateful because I'm angry. Right?
Who's this Pierre?
It's nobody you want. So yeah, that's exactly it. It inverts the way we normally think about things, like you said, right? I'm not in a good mood because the world's a happy place. It's actually the world's a happy place today because I'm in a good mood. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Until that Pierre shows up.
Cool. Well, how was that for your introduction?